The hallway smelled faintly of disinfectant, and Sarah walked with trembling hands pressed against her chest. Her steps echoed, each one louder than the last, until the sterile hospital door came into view. The light above flickered, and she froze. A nurse turned, her eyes heavy with sorrow, and whispered, "I'll call the doctor." Sarah felt the world shrink around her, and the sudden silence clawed at her ears. Dr. Miller appeared, his face pale, carrying the weight of words she did not want to hear. Sarah said, "Please, just tell me he's all right." Her voice cracked like glass. Dr. Miller placed a hand on her shoulder, his lips trembling, and said, "I'm sorry, there's nothing more we can do." The sentence shattered her, and Sarah's knees buckled as she clutched the wall for support. Tears blurred her vision as the sound of her own heartbeat roared in her ears. Her world collapsed in that instant, and the walls of the hospital felt like they were closing in. The hallway felt longer as Sarah leaned against the wall, her body shaking uncontrollably. She whispered, "No, this can't be real," gripping her sweater tightly. The nurse glanced away, unable to meet her gaze, while the sound of beeping monitors pierced the silence. Sarah pressed her hands to her ears, her breath shallow, as her mind replayed the doctor's words. She thought of moments with Michael, his laughter filling their home, the way his eyes shone when he was happy. "Why him?" Sarah cried, her voice echoing in the sterile air. Every breath grew heavier as the emptiness in her chest spread like fire. The nurse tried to speak, but no words came, and Sarah felt trapped inside a nightmare that refused to end. Sarah stumbled toward the door, her hands trembling as she reached for the handle. The cool metal bit into her palm, grounding her in this unbearable reality. She whispered, "Michael, please," as if saying his name could bring him back. The weight of her grief crushed her chest, every heartbeat sharp and hollow. She thought of promises they had made, the future they had dreamed together, all shattered in a single moment. Her tears blurred the door's outline, and her knees nearly gave way again. "Please don't take him from me," she begged, her voice breaking. The door remained cold, unmoving, as if mocking her hope. The door finally opened, and Sarah stepped inside the room where Michael lay. The machines were silent, their stillness more terrifying than noise. Michael's body rested pale and motionless, his chest no longer rising. Sarah whispered, "I'm here," her voice trembling as she reached for his hand. The warmth she expected was gone, replaced by a chilling stillness. Her tears fell onto his skin, and she clutched his fingers tighter, unwilling to let go. "Wake up," she pleaded, her voice cracking, "just one more smile." The silence answered back, deafening and merciless. The world outside the room ceased to exist, and her heart broke again with every breath she forced to take. Sarah lowered her head onto Michael's hand, pressing her lips gently against his knuckles. Her tears pooled on the blanket, and her sobs shook the quiet room. "I can't live without you," she whispered, her words breaking with pain. Memories rushed in, Michael laughing, Michael holding her hand, Michael promising to always stay. Each memory twisted the knife deeper, reminding her of everything she had lost. She felt as though her soul had been torn from her body. She whispered again, softer, "Please, don't leave me." But the silence was unrelenting, and Sarah felt the devastating truth settle like a shadow that would never lift. The next morning, Sarah sat by the window of her small apartment, the city's noise muffled by heavy curtains. She stared blankly at the world outside, where life carried on as if nothing had changed. Her fingers traced the rim of a cold cup of coffee, untouched since dawn. "Michael would have laughed at this silence," she whispered, her voice trembling. The room was cluttered with unwashed dishes, books piled unevenly, and a framed photo of the two of them on the table. In the picture, his smile was wide, his arm around her shoulders, and she remembered how safe she felt in that moment. Her heart ached as she pressed her palm against the glass frame. "You promised we'd grow old together," she muttered, grief tightening her throat. A ray of morning light slipped past the curtains, resting on her face, but she couldn't feel its warmth. Sarah's best friend, Anna, knocked softly before letting herself in, her footsteps hesitant as she entered the dim room. Anna said, "Sarah, you need to eat something." Sarah shook her head, eyes fixed on the photograph. Anna, carrying a small bag of groceries, placed them gently on the counter. She sat beside Sarah, her hand brushing her arm. "I know it hurts," Anna whispered, "but you can't disappear with him." Sarah finally looked at her, her eyes swollen and red. "I don't know how to breathe without him," she admitted, the words breaking free like a confession. Anna's lips trembled as she tried to hide her own tears. Anna reached across the table, grasping Sarah's trembling hands. "He wouldn't want this for you," Anna said firmly. Sarah flinched, her lips quivering, and whispered, "But everything was him." Anna leaned closer, her voice softening. "You are still here, and that matters." The weight of her words fell heavy, yet Sarah felt a flicker of warmth in her chest. For a moment, the silence between them was filled not with grief, but with quiet solidarity. Sarah wiped her face with her sleeve and whispered, "I feel like I've lost myself." Anna squeezed her hands tighter, anchoring her. "Then let me help you find her again." Later that evening, Sarah lay on the couch, a blanket pulled around her shoulders. The television played faintly, but she wasn't watching. Anna cleaned quietly in the kitchen, giving her space while still staying close. Sarah closed her eyes, memories flooding back, Michael's voice teasing her, his laughter echoing down their old hallway. She whispered, "I hear him everywhere." Anna peeked from the kitchen, her expression soft with concern. "That's because he's still part of you," Anna said gently. Sarah turned, hugging the blanket tighter. The truth hurt, but it carried a strange comfort, like holding a fading echo close to her heart. As the night deepened, Sarah stepped onto her balcony. The city stretched before her, filled with glowing lights and muffled sounds of life continuing. She whispered to herself, the world didn't stop. Her chest tightened at the cruel truth, yet a part of her realized she was still breathing, still standing. She thought of Michael's hand in hers, of how he had always told her she was stronger than she believed. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but this time she didn't collapse. Anna joined her quietly, wrapping a hand around Sarah's shoulder. Sarah leaned against her, whispering, "I'm so afraid." Anna replied softly, "Then let's face the fear together." Days blurred into restless nights, and Sarah found herself walking through the city in a daze. Neon lights flickered above crowded streets, laughter spilled from cafes, and music thumped from bars. To her, it all felt hollow. Her mind carried only echoes of Michael's voice, the memory of his hand brushing hers. She whispered, "How can life still move when mine has stopped?" She sat on a bench, staring at couples passing by, their laughter piercing like knives. A man bumped her shoulder without apology, and she flinched as if struck. Her chest tightened, her breath shallow, as grief weighed her body down. The city's energy mocked her despair, and she curled inward, feeling like a ghost in a world that no longer saw her. Sarah returned home to find unpaid bills stacked on the table. She picked one up, her hands trembling. Final notice, the bold letters screamed at her. Michael had always handled finances, and the weight of responsibility pressed down hard. She whispered, "I don't even know where to start." The refrigerator hummed in the silence, empty shelves mocking her with their bareness. Her body ached with exhaustion, but she forced herself to sit at the desk, pen in hand. Numbers blurred as tears smudged the ink. She dropped her head onto the papers, sobbing, "Why did you leave me with this?" The crushing mix of grief and survival clawed at her, and she felt her world spiraling into chaos. That night, Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling as shadows danced from passing headlights outside. The silence felt unbearable, broken only by the ticking clock. She whispered into the darkness, "Michael, I can't do this." A sudden creak in the hallway made her sit up, heart racing. She called out softly, "Michael?" But no one answered. Her mind played cruel tricks, filling the empty space with illusions of his presence. She clutched his sweater, inhaling the faint scent still clinging to the fabric. Tears spilled as she pressed it against her chest, whispering, "Please, just one more night with you." The loneliness consumed her, twisting hope into agony. The next day, Sarah forced herself to return to work at the bookstore where she had spent years alongside Michael. The smell of paper and ink once comforted her, but now, every corner reminded her of him. Coworkers offered sympathetic glances, their silence louder than words. She arranged books on a shelf, her hands shaking so badly she dropped one. The sound echoed, drawing stares. Sarah muttered, "Sorry," though her voice barely rose above a whisper. Each title felt like a cruel reminder of stories unfinished, lives continuing, while hers was stuck in a chapter she couldn't escape. By the end of her shift, she collapsed behind the counter, exhausted and hollow. Later that evening, Anna visited the bookstore, finding Sarah sitting slumped behind the counter. Anna said softly, "You don't have to do this alone." Sarah forced a weak smile, whispering, "I thought keeping busy would help, but everything hurts." Anna knelt beside her, taking her trembling hands in her own. "Then lean on me," Anna urged, her eyes steady with compassion. Sarah broke down again, tears spilling as she whispered, "I don't want to be a burden." Anna shook her head firmly, replying, "You could never be, you are my family." In that fragile moment, Sarah felt the smallest flicker of hope, fragile but real. Rain poured down as Sarah walked home from work, her clothes clinging to her skin. She didn't care. The storm mirrored the chaos inside her. Thunder cracked, and she flinched, whispering, "I can't outrun this pain." Passing couples huddled beneath umbrellas. She felt invisible, as though her grief had erased her from the world. Water blurred her vision, mixing with tears she could no longer hide. Each step felt heavier, her shoes splashing through puddles as her body trembled. She thought of Michael's warm coat, how he'd always shield her from storms. "Why weren't you shielded?" she cried, her voice swallowed by rain. She stopped beneath a flickering streetlight, breaking into sobs that no storm could wash away. Later that night, Sarah sat cross-legged on her apartment floor, surrounded by unpaid bills and scattered envelopes. Her hands shook as she ripped one open, staring at another, overdue notice. "I can't do this alone," she whispered. The silence of the room pressed on her chest. She dialed a number, her voice breaking. "Dad, but she hung up before hearing a voice. Shame burned in her cheeks, pride locking her in isolation. She pressed her forehead to her knees, rocking slightly, whispering, "Michael, why didn't you prepare me for this?" Her tears stained the papers, blurring the numbers into nonsense, and the weight of survival pressed harder than grief itself. The next day, Sarah visited her mother, Margaret, hoping for comfort, but finding conflict instead. Margaret frowned, her tone sharp. "You can't keep living like this, Sarah. Michael wouldn't want you drowning." Sarah's chest tightened. "Don't you think I know that?" she snapped, tears welling. Margaret's eyes softened, but her words cut deep. "Then fight for yourself." Sarah turned away, whispering, "I'm so tired of fighting." The kitchen felt suffocating, every word heavy with tension. Margaret reached out, but Sarah recoiled, feeling both abandoned and misunderstood. Their silence grew louder than their words, and Sarah left with her heart heavier than before. At night, Sarah lay in bed clutching Michael's old sweater, the scent fading with every passing day. Memories of their last conversation haunted her. He had said, "I'll always be here," his voice warm, his smile unshaken. She whispered into the silence, "You lied." Her body shook as grief twisted into anger. She slammed the sweater onto the bed and screamed, "You left me alone." Her voice cracked into sobs, the sound echoing off the walls. She collapsed against the pillow, exhausted, clutching the sweater again in desperation. "I didn't mean it," she whispered, shame soaking her tears. Her heart wrestled between love and rage, leaving her broken and restless. The following evening, Sarah met Anna at a quiet cafe. The warm smell of coffee filled the air, but Sarah could barely taste her drink. Anna leaned forward, voice steady. "You're spiraling, Sarah. You need help." Sarah's eyes filled with tears and she whispered, "I don't want to burden anyone." Anna reached across the table, gripping her hand tightly. "You're not a burden. You're my sister and everything that matters." Sarah broke into sobs, whispering, "Then don't let me fall." Anna pulled her into an embrace across the small table. For the first time, Sarah allowed herself to rest in someone else's strength, even as her storm raged on. A week later, Sarah visited Michael's office to collect his belongings. The air was stale, dust clinging to papers left untouched. She opened drawers filled with notes, pens, and small reminders of his daily life. Her hands paused on a sealed envelope, marked with her name. Her heart raced as she whispered, "Why would he leave this here?" She broke the seal, her eyes scanning shaky handwriting. The letter revealed secrets Michael never shared. Debts piling higher than she ever imagined. Sleepless nights he had hidden with a smile. "You carried this alone," she whispered, her voice trembling. The realization shattered her, grief mixing with betrayal. She sank into his chair, clutching the letter, her tears smearing the ink. Sarah flipped through more folders, each page unraveling a truth she wasn't ready for. Michael had borrowed money from people she never knew, names scrawled in angry red ink. She whispered, "Why didn't you tell me?" Her stomach turned as she realized their life together had been built on fragile ground. Anger surged through her veins, mingling with sorrow. "You said we could face anything together," she muttered bitterly. The office walls closed in, suffocating her. The weight of every lie crushed her chest. She slammed the folder shut, gasping as though the paper itself had stolen her breath. Her tears fell harder, burning with betrayal she could not escape. That evening, Sarah confronted Margaret with the letter. Margaret's expression darkened, her eyes flickering with something Sarah didn't expect: recognition. Margaret said softly, "I told him to keep it from you." Sarah's breath caught. "You knew!" she cried, her voice breaking into rage. Margaret tried to reach for her hand, but Sarah pulled back. "How could you let me believe everything was fine?" she demanded. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I thought I was protecting you." Sarah staggered back, shaking her head. "Protecting me? You destroyed me." Her chest heaved as betrayal layered over grief. The truth burned like fire in her veins. Sarah stormed into Anna's apartment, clutching the letter. Her sobs echoed through the small space as she collapsed onto the couch. Anna hurried over, wrapping her arms around her. Sarah cried, "They lied to me, both of them." Anna held her tighter, whispering, "Then let it out. Don't hold it in any more." Sarah's fists trembled as she slammed the letter onto the coffee table. "Everything I thought I knew is gone," she choked. Anna's eyes welled with tears, her voice steady. "That doesn't change what's real. Your love was real." Sarah buried her face against Anna's shoulder, her sobs shaking them both. Later that night, Sarah sat alone on Anna's balcony, city lights glowing faintly against the dark sky. She held the letter in her lap, her fingers trembling. "You wanted to protect me, Michael," she whispered. "But lies don't protect, they destroy." Her voice cracked as the wind tugged gently at the paper. She pressed the letter against her chest, eyes staring at the horizon. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but there was a fire in her gaze. "I have to let go," she whispered, her voice firmer this time. For the first time in weeks, her breaths came steady, even as her heart remained fractured. Sarah stood in the rain outside Margaret's house, the letter clutched in her hand. Her body shook, not from the storm, but from the fire inside her chest. When Margaret opened the door, Sarah's eyes burned with fury. "You knew everything," she cried, voice breaking. Margaret tried to soothe her. "I only wanted to protect you." Sarah stepped forward, trembling. "You don't protect someone by burying them in lies." Her tears mixed with raindrops, her voice raw and sharp. "I lost him once in death. Now I'm losing him again in truth." Margaret's eyes filled with regret, but Sarah's rage overpowered the sorrow. She screamed, "You took away my chance to help him. You let me believe in a lie." The storm thundered overhead, echoing her anguish. Inside, the air felt heavier than the storm. Sarah paced the living room, her fists trembling. Margaret said softly, "I didn't want you to hate him." Sarah turned sharply, her eyes blazing. You think I could hate him? I loved him more than life itself. Her voice cracked as her chest heaved. I could have carried the weight with him, but you made sure I never could. Margaret sobbed quietly, but Sarah's anger burned through. I was his wife, not a child who needed protection, Sarah spat. She collapsed into a chair, gripping the letter tightly. You left me powerless, and now all I have left is regret. The room echoed with silence, every breath jagged with pain. Sarah stormed back to her apartment, throwing the letter onto the table. Anna arrived minutes later, breathless after Sarah's frantic call. Sarah's voice was hoarse, trembling with rage. They all lied, Anna. Everyone kept me in the dark. She slammed her fists against the table, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Anna moved closer, her eyes wet, whispering, "Let it out, Sarah. Don't hold it back anymore." Sarah broke, sobbing violently, collapsing into Anna's arms. I don't know who I am without him, she cried, clutching Anna like a lifeline. Anna whispered firmly, "Then tonight you face it. Tonight you stop letting lies own you." Hours later, Sarah sat alone on her balcony, staring at the city lights. Her hands trembled as she read Michael's letter again, her tears falling onto the paper. She whispered, "I can't forgive the lies, but I can forgive you." The words tasted like glass in her mouth, sharp yet freeing. Her chest rose and fell as she let out a sob that carried both anger and love. She gripped the letter tightly, then set it down beside her, closing her eyes. "I love you, Michael," she whispered, her voice shaking. "But I have to let go of this pain." The wind brushed against her skin, almost like a gentle hand, and for the first time she felt the faintest sense of peace. The next morning, Sarah stood at Michael's grave, sunlight breaking through gray clouds. Her hands shook as she placed the letter down, pressing her fingers to the stone. "I forgive you," she whispered, tears streaming. "But I can't carry this anymore." Her voice cracked, but she stood tall. "I will live even if it breaks me at first." She closed her eyes, inhaling the scent of wet earth and morning air. Her shoulders trembled, but she didn't fall. For the first time she let go, not of her love, but of the chains that bound her. She whispered, "Goodbye, Michael," her voice steady, filled with both sorrow and courage. Days passed, and Sarah found herself walking through the park near her apartment. Children's laughter filled the air, blending with the chirping of birds. She sat on a bench, sunlight filtering through branches, warming her skin. For the first time she felt something close to calm. She whispered, "Maybe I can start again." The memory of Michael lingered, heavy yet gentle, no longer suffocating. She thought of his smile, of promises broken but love that remained undeniable. Her chest still ached, but she realized grief had softened its grip. A single tear rolled down her cheek as she whispered, "I'll carry you differently now." Sarah returned to the bookstore, her steps steadier than before. The scent of paper no longer pierced her with sorrow. It carried comfort instead. As she stacked books, Anna entered, smiling gently. "You're here," Anna said, her voice proud. Sarah nodded, whispering, "I need to be." Customers passed by, unaware of her inner battles, yet she felt present for the first time in weeks. Anna hugged her from behind, whispering, "He would be proud." Sarah closed her eyes, letting the words sink deep. "Maybe it's time I live for both of us," she said softly. That evening, Sarah visited Margaret again. The silence between them was thick, but softer this time. Margaret's hands trembled as she handed Sarah a photo of Michael as a child. "I only wanted to keep him safe," Margaret whispered. Sarah studied the picture, tears filling her eyes. "I know," she said quietly, "but I needed the truth too." They sat together, grief bridging their distance. Margaret's head rested against Sarah's shoulder, both women crying softly. "We both lost him," Sarah whispered. For the first time, she allowed compassion to pierce her anger, finding peace in their shared sorrow. On a quiet Sunday, Sarah stood in her apartment, opening the windows wide. Sunlight filled the room, spilling over clutter she began to clear away. Each dish she washed, each book she stacked, felt like reclaiming herself. She whispered, "This is mine to rebuild." Anna called from the kitchen. "Want me to help?" Sarah smiled faintly. "No, I need to do this." Her hands moved with quiet determination, each action small but significant. For the first time, the apartment didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like a place where life could begin again. That night, Sarah lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as silence filled the room. Michael's sweater rested folded on the chair by the window. She whispered softly, "I'll always love you, but I'm learning to let you go." Tears slid down her cheeks, but her lips curved into the faintest smile. She reached for the lamp, whispering, "Good night, Michael." Her voice trembled but held strength. As the light clicked off, darkness embraced her, not as suffocating grief but as quiet acceptance. Her heart still carried the weight of loss, but also the spark of renewal. The silence lingered, tender and final,